Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Anne Marie, and today I'm going to discuss the 10 Things I Love About You, The Marlow Murder Club by Robert Thorogood. This is a no spoilers book review, so don't worry about me revealing any plot twists or spoiling any surprise endings. The whole point of this is to simply give you an inside peek into the book. So here we go. The Marlow Murder Club is the first book in Robert Thorogood's cozy mystery series of the same name. The second book in the series is Death Comes to Marlow, and the third is The Queen of Poisons. In addition to writing, Robert Thorogood is also the creator of the television series Death in Paradise. Something I've noticed about all three books in his Marlow Murder Club series, as well as many of the Death in Paradise episodes, is that it's not just a question of who committed the crime, but it's also a question of how it was done. More often than not, the murders occur under seemingly impossible circumstances. For example, all the suspects have solid alibis, or the murder occurred in a locked room that no one else entered or exited, or the victim was killed out in the open even though no one was around to commit the crime. So not only are we left wondering who did it, but we're also left wondering how it was done when the circumstances make it impossible for a murder to have occurred. Robert Thorogood's technique keeps us guessing throughout the story and makes his mystery series a lot of fun. The first thing I love about the Marlow Murder Club is that it's easy to read. This is a fun, cozy mystery with amateur sleuths in a small community setting. There is minimal profanity, violence, naughtiness, but none of that is necessary because we get to tag along with an entertaining motley trio of women as they solve murder mysteries in Marlow, England. So, who are these women? Well, let's start with Judith, shall we? She's number 2 on my list. Mrs. Judith Potts is a whiskey-drinking, puzzle-loving, bicycle-riding, 77-year-old widow who lives in an arts and crafts mansion on the River Thames. She compiles crosswords for national newspapers, and she likes to go skinny dipping in the river late at night when no one is watching. I would describe Judith as the fearless leader of the trio, and she is the character we are first introduced to at the beginning of the novel. During the course of the book, we learn that she was expelled from 3 boarding schools during her youth. Her most treasured possession is her dark gray woolen cape, and that she has a bit of a sweet tooth. Judith carries around an old-fashioned tin of travel sweets with her, lime being her favorite. One of my favorite paragraphs that offers some insight into Judith's character is found in chapter 10. This paragraph made me laugh the first time I read it. By 6 p.m., Judith realized she was feeling peckish. She'd recently been trying to shift a bit of weight, so she decided she'd have a poached egg on a single slice of toast for her tea. Then again, there was no way 1 egg would ever be enough, so she had 2 eggs and plenty of butter on 2 slices of toast, and a few oven chips to fill in the corners of her hunger, seeing as the rest of the meal was so healthy. And a nice cup of sweet tea, and one of those super tiny bars of specialty chocolate for her pudding. Although she'd not been able to find one of the tiny bars when she'd done her weekly shop, so she'd bought herself a family-size fruit and nut bar. Not that she'd finish it in one sitting, of course. It would easily last her the rest of the week. Judith was just finishing the last square of chocolate when the local news started on her TV. So that's Judith for you. Number 3 on my list is Judith's home. Judith inherited her home on the River Thames from her great-aunt Betty. It's a pink brick, timber-framed, somewhat crumbling arts and craft mansion, complete with a garden and a boathouse. The home contains a grand piano and an oak-paneled hallway, a bay window, a heavy oak staircase, a minstrel's gallery, wing-back chairs, and ancient oil paintings on the walls. Her bedroom contains a majestic 4-poster bed with a tapestry of a medieval hunting scene as its canopy. The first time Susie Harris sees the inside of Judith's house, she exclaims that Judith must be minted. That means extremely rich. Which brings me to number 4 on the list, Susie Harris. Susie Harris is roughly 50 years old, and this is how Judith describes her in chapter 10. As she got closer, Judith could see the woman seemed to have a very solid quality to her. It was the way she stood with her feet so firmly planted to the ground, like a general surveying her troops, or a captain standing at the bridge of an old schooner. Susie has been a dog walker for 3 decades, and she tells Judith not to be fooled by the nice front gardens and smart cars of the people in Marlow, because they are wicked. She is the mother of 2 children and the grandmother of 1, and she loves dogs, which is why she's been a dog walker for 3 decades. Throughout the course of the story, we get the impression her finances are lacking. For example, in chapter 15, we learn that the front of her home is missing. It's a jumble of scaffolding, bits of blue plastic sheeting, and exposed jacks and roof-supporting joists. It's a yet-to-be-finished extension because the builder took off 3 years ago with all her money. At the start of chapter 17, we learn that the seats in Susie's van are ripped, and where the ignition key should have been, there was an old screwdriver jammed into the wheel's steering column. So in terms of finances, Judith and Susie are in very different situations. Number 5 on the list is Becky, Rebecca. She's never quite sure how to introduce herself. Beck Starling is the vicar's wife. She is in her early 40s, has sleek blonde hair, and is constantly concerned about her physical appearance. Neurotic is a good word to describe her. She has 2 children, a 14-year-old son named Sam, and a 16-year-old daughter, Chloe, who is currently giving Bex a bit of trouble. Throughout the book, we get the impression that Bex had a wild youth and that this might be rolling over ever so slightly into adulthood. For example, Jezebel is her online alter ego. She's fit and has incredible strength because she engages in a punishing weekly fitness program of spinning, boxercise, and yoga classes. She's allergic to dust, so she keeps an exceptionally clean house that Susie refers to as an advert, like you get in magazines, but no one actually lives that way. As the vicar's wife, she is familiar with the people who attend All Saints Church. She also has an interest in the local property market. She bakes her own bread and makes mayonnaise with a hand whisk. In chapter 20, we learn that her only sanity is to be the best housewife there'd ever been. She's an asset to the trio because she's quick-thinking and resourceful. Number 6 on the list is Detective Sergeant Tanika Malik from the Maidenhead Police Station. The police are present in this book, but they take a back seat to the amateur sleuths because, again, this is a cozy mystery. Nevertheless, Tanika Malik is currently the acting senior investigating officer because her boss, the detective inspector, is out with a stress-related illness. She's described as being in her early 40s with an air of teacherly efficiency. Tanika is currently struggling to balance the demands of her career with the responsibilities in her personal life, especially since she works such long hours. She's experienced and knowledgeable, though she doubts her abilities as the acting senior investigating officer. Luckily, she has 3 meddling amateur sleuths to help her with the investigation. At one point in the book, her superintendent tells her to do everything in her power to move the cases forward, but the lack of a budget and manpower make it difficult to do so. This is when she enlists the help of the Marlow Murder Club to act as voluntary civilian advisors. Number 7 on my list is my favorite metaphor. I love metaphors. When done well, I think they are an effective way for a writer to put an image into a reader's mind by describing one thing as something else. They are a way for a writer to bring words to life. So I'm always on the lookout for metaphors that I consider effective. My favorite in the Marlow Murder Club is in chapter 20. Susie spent so many years as a single mother raising her 2 children while holding down a job. She'd lost touch with whatever friends she'd once had. And now that her children had left home, she felt stranded, like an old boat that had been marooned on a beach as the tide went out. I like this imagery. It keeps with the underlying nautical theme, which is number 8 on my list. As I mentioned earlier, Judith's mansion is on the River Thames. We learn this in the 2nd sentence of the book, and there's an underlying nautical theme woven throughout the entire story that includes references to rowing, canoes, and Judith's punt, which is a long and narrow, flat-bottomed boat. Furthermore, in chapter 5, Judith is thinking about one of the suspects, and this is how the paragraph reads. As she straightened her cape on her shoulders, Judith realized she didn't have any specific plan for what she should do next. All she knew was she had to see him. She wanted to see the cut of his jib. If you're unsure what that means, let me explain. The cut of someone's jib refers to a person's appearance or demeanor. It originates from sailors using the term jib to describe the triangular sail at the front of a ship. Boats of different nationalities had differently shaped jib sails, so if you were on the shoreline, you could easily identify the nationality of a vessel from a distance. If a ship from a hostile nation was approaching, you probably wouldn't like the cut of its jib. On the other hand, if you liked the cut of their jib, that means you approved of them. In a similar way, liking the cut of a person's jib means you like their style or their character. Number 9 on my list is Marlow, England, the setting for the series. Marlow is a peaceful place where residents generally live side by side in harmony, except for when they're murdering each other. In Chapter 3, Judith thinks about how Marlow isn't too large or too small, it's just right. The town is described in the following way. The high street had an elegant Georgian suspension bridge, and ancient riverside church at one end, an ornamental obelisk at the other, and, in between, there was every type of historic building, from centuries of piecemeal development down each side. To tie it all together into an aesthetic whole, red and blue bunting crisscrossed the length of the high street, creating the sort of chocolate box image of an English home counties town that jigsaw puzzles were made of. And that brings us to the final item on my list, number 10. With this mystery, you get 2 for the price of 1. What do I mean by that? Well, as I mentioned earlier, both in his books and in his television shows, Robert Thorogood makes you question not only who done it, but also how was it done. There's an extra component to solve beyond the question of who is responsible for the crime. Earlier I mentioned his television show Death in Paradise, but Robert Thorogood is also the creator of Beyond Paradise, which is a spin-off of Death in Paradise. For those of you who have seen the show, I have to say my favorite episode is episode 4 from season 1, written by Ian Kershaw. A man with no identification is found dead in a newly formed crop circle. The last page of Great Expectations by Charles Dickens is tucked into his sock. Who killed him? Why? How? There are a lot of questions to answer, and just like with the Marlow Murder Club book series, the way it all comes together is both brilliant and clever. If you are a fan of mysteries that keep you guessing until the end, I think you will enjoy Robert Thorogood's shows as well as his books. If you've read any of the books in this series and would like to add to my list of things to love, please do so in the comments. Until next time, take care, be well, and happy reading.